Hello, this is Sonia with the Sci-Fi Adventures channel, back with you for Chapter 2 of my story, The Case of the Missing General. And I have titled this chapter, Stephen and Sheila Meet. So I'm going to go ahead and just get right back to the story. Stephen was just about to fill his mug with coffee when the doorbell rang. Making his way to the front door, he opened it and found Sheila standing outside and wearing the purple raincoat she had mentioned on the phone. He opened the door wider and invited her in. "Please come on in, Sheila. It is nice to finally meet you in person. I just made coffee for us if you want some." Sheila nodded vigorously, looking quite relieved to be out of the rain as she stepped inside. Stephen was immediately struck by the intensity of her bright blue and beautiful eyes as she looked at him fully. "Thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate this." Sheila took her raincoat off right away, and her wavy auburn hair spilled out of the hood and fell around her shoulders. "I'm so relieved to be here, Stephen. I have felt so alone. If it were not for Dorian suggesting that I contact you, I'm not sure what I would have done." Stephen was pleased to see Sheila already so at ease that she followed him directly into the kitchen and stood watching as he poured the coffee and set out the cream and sugar. Taking hold of her mug with both hands for warmth, Sheila caught sight of Whiskers, who was still sleeping soundly in his bed. "How lovely, you have a cat. He is beautiful." Stephen smiled and nodded in agreement. "Thank you. His name is Whiskers. Not too original, I know, but I think he likes it." Sheila smiled. "I think it's a perfect name for him." Suddenly her expression sobered as she turned her full attention back to Stephen. "I'm sorry to be involving you in all of this, and I'm afraid that things have just gotten even worse." Stephen made an effort to keep his expression neutral as he wondered what could have made things worse. "What else has happened, Sheila? I'm taking your case, by the way, and let me reassure you that I have chosen to get involved. In fact, Dorian and I are going to do all that we can to help you." Grateful tears welled up suddenly in Sheila's eyes. "Oh, I'm sorry to be falling apart on you like this. I'm just so relieved and thankful to have your help, especially since I believe my father is now missing." Stephen blinked in surprise at the distressing news. "We will do everything we can to get to the bottom of this, Sheila. You're not going to go through this alone." Sheila nodded, and tears welled up once again in her eyes. "I was expecting him for dinner last night, but he never showed up. I waited for 2 hours and then headed straight to his apartment complex, and I spoke to Sal, the night manager, who said he has not seen or heard from him since that morning. I then asked Sal if my father had mentioned anything about leaving for any length of time, and he said no." Choking back a sob, Sheila struggled to continue. "I probably should have just gone up to my father's apartment right then to check for clues, but to tell you the truth, and I'm not really proud of this, I was afraid to go alone, and I did not know if I should involve the police just yet. That is why I wanted to come here to you right away. I know it is a lot to ask, but I was wondering if you would be willing to go with me to my father's apartment. I have a key, and I thought we could search his place for any clues that might tell us where he went. His sudden disappearance does not make sense to me at all. My father has never backed down or run away from anything in his life. That is how I know something else must be going on here." Sheila's face had become flushed, and she paused a moment to catch her breath. "I have not even told Dorian this yet, but my father has a psych evaluation scheduled for this coming Monday. I don't know what will happen if he does not show up for it." Sheila's voice suddenly trailed off, and Stephen noticed with alarm that she had started to shake. Without hesitation, and quite instinctively, he found himself rushing to her side and putting a protective arm around her. Worried that she might be going into shock, he let out a sigh of relief when she leaned back against him. And then, as though she had done this 1,000 times before, she settled into his arms and stopped shaking. It was then, in that precise moment, that Stephen realized with a start that he was in now, not only in over his head professionally, but personally as well. Who was he kidding? From the instant he had laid eyes on Sheila, there had been an ease and instant connection unlike anything he had ever experienced before. The train of events that unfolded next were somewhat of a blur to Stephen in hindsight. The phone had suddenly started to ring, and Sheila, looking wide-eyed and clearly rattled, spoke out in a shaky voice. "It could be Dorian calling. I did tell her I would try to see you as soon as possible. But Stephen, what if it isn't Dorian?" Neither one of them could explain the sudden sense of urgency coming over them, and they did not speak of it either. Deciding to follow his reporter instincts, Stephen hurriedly took hold of Sheila's hand and headed for the front foyer. When they were about to reach the front door, Sheila stopped abruptly in her tracks. "Wait, Stephen, we can't leave Whiskers." Grabbing her raincoat, she wrapped it around her as she ran back to the kitchen. While Stephen waited for her return, he picked up the general's case file and opened the front door. It was still raining outside, so he put the file under his shirt, hoping to protect it. Sheila joined him at the front door with Whiskers, who seemed surprisingly content and unaffected. His head was peeking out from the folds of the raincoat as Sheila held him close to her. Without a word, they dashed out together into the pouring rain and headed for the car. Meanwhile, back inside Stephen's house, the phone had finally stopped ringing, and as irony or fate would have it, the caller had indeed been Dorian after all. And that does end chapter 2. Thank you for joining me. I hope you're enjoying the story so far, and I look forward to being back with you soon with chapter 3 here on the Sci-Fi Adventures channel.